What if I told you that the monsters that haunted our ancestors' stories weren't just fiction? Seriously, what if they were actually memories? Distorted echoes of creatures that were terrifyingly real. Well, that's what we're going to do today. We're going to peel back the layers of legend and search for the truth hiding in the shadows of our own history. That quote right there, that's the core idea we're diving into. What if the line between myth and reality is, well, way blurrier than we think? What if these stories aren't just tales, but are actual ancestral memories of creatures our predecessors saw, fought, and, you better believe it, remembered? So, here's our roadmap. We're going to start by listening to the echoes of extinct giants. Then we'll uncover how some completely misunderstood fossils gave birth to these incredible legends. We're even going to ask if some monsters were actually our own human cousins. And then finally, we'll look at the mysteries that are still lurking in our world today. All right, let's get right into it. Time to start peeling back those layers of legend to find the surprising truths hiding underneath. This is the question that honestly changes everything. It reframes mythology not as simple fantasy, but as a kind of fragmented ancient history. It's like a record of a world that was wilder and stranger than we could even begin to imagine. Okay, our first stop is the Ice Age. We're talking about a time when our ancestors lived alongside and yes, sometimes hunted these absolutely colossal creatures. These were the megafauna, beasts so awe-inspiring that their memories survived in our stories long after they vanished from the earth. The unicorn, we all know it, right? A graceful, magical horse, a total staple of fantasy. But what if its real origins aren't in a storybook at all, but buried deep in the fossil record? A memory from our deep past. Okay, so the reality is something way stranger. Meet a lasmatherium. This was a massive rhino from the Ice Age. So no, it wasn't a horse, but it was a real single-horned beast that our ancestors absolutely 100% ran into. Can you imagine seeing a creature like that? That memory would for sure curdle into legend over time. Just let that sink in for a second. The unicorn was real, in a sense, a giant of the Ice Age. And its story doesn't end with magic. It ends with extinction, and very likely in our own hands. That's a pretty sobering thought, isn't it? And we see the same pattern with the Griffin, part lion, part eagle. Well, until just a few centuries ago, New Zealand was home to a real-life king of the sky, the Haast's eagle. This was an apex predator so massive it hunted 500-pound moa birds. And just like its prey, once humans showed up, it disappeared, leaving only a legend behind. But what if the monster wasn't a memory of a living creature at all, but a misunderstanding of a dead one? You gotta remember, ancient people were basically paleontologists without the instruction manual. They were constantly digging up fossils and just trying to make sense of them. Take the Cyclops. It sounds completely fantastical, right? A giant with one single eye in the middle of its forehead? How could a myth like that possibly get started from something real? Well, the answer is surprisingly simple, and it was literally lying right there in the ground. Okay, picture this. You're an ancient Greek farmer, you're out in your field, and you unearth a skull as big as a boulder. And right in the center, there's this single massive hole. Now, with zero knowledge of elephants or their trunks, what would you think? You'd think you'd found the remains of a one-eyed giant. And boom, just like that, from a simple misinterpretation, the legend of the Cyclops is born. And the same logic applies to dragons. Imagine digging up the fossil of a Quetzalcoatlus. This thing wasn't a dinosaur, it was a pterosaur, and it stood as tall as a giraffe with a wingspan wider than a bus. When you find the bones of a flying reptile that huge, is it any wonder our ancestors dreamed up dragons? The whole fire-breathing thing? Well, that's just the human imagination adding a terrifying final touch. Alright, this next part. For me, this is one of the most fascinating ideas of all. What if some of the most human-like monsters, trolls, dwarves, hobbits, what if they were actually fragmented memories of other human species that we shared the planet with? This timeline right here shows a really profound truth. For most of our history, we were not the only humans on Earth. We shared this planet with other hominids. We competed with them, we interacted with them, and eventually, we were the only ones left. But what happened to the memory of them? Did it just vanish, or did it transform into something else? The connections are just striking. Think of the trolls from Northern European folklore, strong, rough-featured beings who live in caves. It's a near-perfect description of Neanderthals. And then you've got Homo floresiensis, this species of tiny humans, barely 3 feet tall who lived on an island in Indonesia. They used tools, they hunted. They were, for all intents and purposes, real-life hobbies. So, we've seen how memories of the past can create monsters. But our tendency to project monsters into the great unknowns, that hasn't faded one bit. We still ask those ancient questions, and today, the biggest unknown on our planet is, without a doubt, the deep ocean. Back in 1997, science detected this, the bloop. It was an incredibly loud, super low-frequency sound coming from the depths of the Pacific. It was so powerful, the immediate speculation was that it had to be a living creature and something absolutely gargantuan. Now, while the initial mass pointed to a creature way bigger than any blue whale, the scientific consensus eventually landed on a natural phenomenon, the sound of giant icebergs cracking. It's a perfect modern example of our instinct to hear monsters in the dark. But just because the bloop wasn't a beast, that doesn't mean there aren't any left to find. And this right here, this is the number to remember, 5%. That is how much of our planet's oceans we have actually truly explored. 95% remains a complete and total mystery. It's wild, but we know more about the surface of Mars than we do about the bottom of our own seas. So, what have we learned? We know for a fact our world was once home to creatures that would seem completely mythical to us today. We've seen how memory and misunderstanding turned them into legends. The final question then isn't just about what was, but what might still be, hiding out there in that other 95%, just waiting for us in the dark. Like and subscribe to learn more about mysteries of the past. Share now.